Muy buenos días, un saludo al misionero Miguel Bermúdez Marín y a
Good
todos los
morning.
hermanos
Greetings to the
reunidos
missionary
allá
Miguel Bermúdez
en
Marín
Matamoros,
and to all the
Tamaulipas,
brethren
México,
gathered there in Matamoros,
en la
Tamaulipas,
congregación que
Mexico,
pastorea el
in the
reverendo José
congregation that
Raúl
Reverend
Hernández.
José Raúl Hernandez
Hoy,
pastors.
sábado 22 de julio de
Today,
este año
July 22nd of
2023,
this year,
y
2023,
todos los que están
and all
reunidos
those who are gathered
en los diferentes
in the
países
different
de
countries
América Latina y
of
el
Latin
Caribe
America and the
y el
Caribbean
mundo entero.
and the whole world.
Pueden tomar asiento, por favor.
You may please be
Es
seated.
realmente una bendición grande que el Señor
It is truly a great blessing
nos
that the
concede
Lord
a cada
grants
uno de
us,
nosotros vivir en este tiempo
each
tan
one of us, to
maravilloso
live in this
y tan
glorious and
maravilloso
marvelous time
en el cual
in which
Él está cumpliendo
He is fulfilling
las profecías
the prophecies
correspondientes a
pertaining
este
to
tiempo
this end
final.
time.
Profecías
Prophecies
que fueron habladas
that were
por
spoken
los santos profetas
by
de
the
Dios,
holy prophets of God,
los cuales fueron inspirados
who were
por el
inspired
Espíritu de Dios
by the Spirit of God
para que fueran habladas
for them to be
y
spoken.
en su debido tiempo.
And in
Dios
due time, God
cumplirlas
fulfilled
en
them
medio de la raza
in the
humana.
midst of human race.
A nosotros
And to us,
Dios nos ha dado ese privilegio y esa
God has
bendición
given us that privilege
de,
and that
por
blessing
predestinación,
of
por
by
elección divina,
predestination, by
que
divine
nos haya
election,
colocado vivir en
that
este
He has
tiempo
placed us
para
to
recibir
live in this
las más
time,
grandes
to
promesas que
receive
Él
the
tiene
greatest promises
para
that He has
cada uno de
for each
nosotros,
one of us,
las cuales las estaremos recibiendo
which we will be
en nuestra
receiving
edad,
in
la
our
edad de la
age,
piedra angular
in
y
the age of
nuestra
the
dispensación,
cornerstone and our
la
dispensation, the
dispensación del reino.
dispensation of the
Todas
kingdom.
las promesas
All the promises
contenidas
contained
en la dispensación del reino
in the dispensation of the
son para
kingdom
aquellos
are for
que
those who are
en esa
in
dispensación.
that
O sea
dispensation.
que las promesas
That is,
para
the
cada
promises for
dispensación
each dispensation
son
are
recibidas y cumplidas
received
en
and
aquellos
fulfilled
que
in
entran a
those
esa
who
nueva
enters
dispensación.
that new dispensation.
Y en
And
cada cambio de dispensación,
in every change of dispensation,
Dios
God
ha estado en la escena.
has been in the scene.
Vean allí
See?
cuando
There when
Adán
Adam
y Eva
and Eve
hicieron lo que hicieron,
did what they did,
o sea,
that is,
tomaron
they took
del árbol de
of the
ciencia del
tree
bien y del
of
mal,
knowledge of good and
lo
evil,
cual Dios le había dicho
which God had told
que de
him
todo fruto podían comer,
that of
excepto
every fruit
del árbol
they
de
might
ciencia del
eat,
bien y del mal. De ese
except
no,
of the
porque el
tree
día que
of
comieran
knowledge
ese
of
día
good and evil,
iban a morir.
not of that
Ahora
one.
miren cómo la serpiente,
For in the day that they did
el
it,
diablo,
that day they will die.
engaña a Eva
Now, look how the
diciéndole
serpent, the devil,
que
deceives Eve
no
by
es que
telling
iban a
her
morir,
that it is not
más
that
bien
you
es
will
que los
die,
ojos se le
but that your
iban a
eyes
abrir
will be opened
y iban a conocer
and you would know.
y un sinnúmero de
And a
cosas
number of
Vean.
things, see,
que el diablo
that the devil
tomó solamente
took only
una parte
a
de la
part of
palabra
the word
y la transgiversó.
and twisted it.
O sea, no tomó
That is, he didn't
la
take
palabra
the
completa,
whole word,
lo cual
which was
era la orden
the
divina,
divine
la orden
order,
de Dios,
God's order,
de no tomar, comer
not to
del
take
árbol
or
de
eat
ciencia del bien y
of the
del mal.
tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Ahora vean cómo Dios
Now,
mismo
see how God right there
fue el que
was
buscó
the one who looked
a Adán y Eva
for Adam and
y le dice,
Eve
¿dónde estás?
and says
Vean,
to
él
him,
mismo bajó allí.
"Where are you?"
Ahí
Notice
estaba
he
haciendo
himself went down there.
en
There he was
ese tiempo,
making
ese cambio de
at
la
that time the
dispensación de la
change
inocencia a la
from the
dispensación de la
dispensation of
conciencia,
innocence to the dispensation of consciousness,
como ocurrió
as it also happened
también en las
in
diferentes
the different
dispensaciones. Lo
dispensations.
vemos también en
We see it
la
also
dispensación
in the dispensation of
del
the
gobierno humano
human
de Noé.
government of Noah.
Lo vemos también allí,
We see it also
en
there
medio de la raza humana,
in the
para
midst
traer el
of
juicio
human
divino.
race to bring
ese
the
cambio de
divine
dispensación.
judgment in that change
Lo
of
vemos
dispensation.
también
We
en
see him also
el tiempo de
in the
Abraham,
time of Abraham
cuando visitó
when
a
he
Abraham.
visited
Lo
Abraham.
vimos también en el tiempo
We
de
saw him
Moisés.
also in the time of Moses.
Vean, en una zarza le
See,
habló
in the
allí a
bush,
Moisés.
he spoke there
He
to
oído el
Moses.
clamor de mi
I have heard the cry of my people who are in Egypt, and I have come down to deliver them. Notice God's presence is always in the midst of the human race, in those changes of dispensations. In other words, it is God Himself coming down in those dispensational interlaces, for He has also been in the ages, in every age of the Hebrew church and in every age of the Gentile church. He has been working. But in the changes of dispensations, we see the presence of Elohim, the presence of God. We see there in the time of John the Baptist, where the dispensation of the law was ending, the dispensation of grace was beginning. The Word made flesh there in the midst of the human race. You see, in the changes of dispensation, God is always personally working in those changes of dispensation. Now look what Brother William says there in the message, the seventh seal and the spirit of Moses and Elijah. He tells us, God, for the sake of His elect, He has not destroyed this planet Earth. Although, since hundreds of years ago, humanity has deserved the destruction, but for the sake of the elect, God has extended the life of the human race. Now remember, when He left in 2017 and He asked for more time, look how when a messenger leaves the scene, a plague falls, and see how there is a destruction. And that is why He was saying, if I do not return, you would have to go through the great tribulation. Now look how God was showing there in those days, which the island of Puerto Rico suffered a catastrophic pounding, because that was something, that Hurricane Maria was something catastrophic for the island. It completely destroyed it. And that shows us that if the coming would have been completely fulfilled in Brother William, that it would have been completely fulfilled in him, and that in those days the rapture would have happened, which didn't happen because the people, the chosen ones, were not with the rapturing faith. But God was showing there, notice, after His departure in 2017, although He later returned, but see, there came a destruction 2 months later, more or less, over Puerto Rico. And notice, that would have already started, see, 30 to 40 days around there. The Great Tribulation would have started. Then right now, this year, we would have already been in the millennium. If the people had the rapturing faith at that time when He left, and that time of 30 to 40 days had taken place, and the people of God would be in those 30 to 40 days already transformed, and their rapture would have taken place in those days. The Great Tribulation would have already, you see, would already be ending, or would have finished, and the millennium would have already begun. But see how God was showing there what would be like when the ministries of Moses and Elijah, Revelation 11, is fulfilled, where a great earthquake will come, and a series of events will be taking place as they did at the time of Jesus, at the time of Jesus' crucifixion and His resurrection. because everything will be parallel. And at that time, God was showing there what would be later on in the fulfillment of Revelation 11. But if he says, if I don't come back and I don't ask for more time and God sends me, you would have to go through the tribulation. Now, look how he in a message, he told us that because he left or is going to leave at that time, speaking in the future, he would leave the ministries of Moses and Elijah, because by leaving the ministries of Moses and Elijah, one, the church wouldn't be denominationalized, and two, he would be extending the mercy for the sake of the elect. But look, when that happens, which is for the sake of the elect, although in each change of dispensation where Elohim, God, reveals himself in the midst of those changes of dispensation, he brings divine judgment, but he also brings blessing. And that is what our brother William tells us here. He says, he is speaking of the time of Abraham. He says, Abraham tells God, may there are not 50 righteous, maybe 5 are missing from the 50. Will you destroy the city because 5 are missing from 50 righteous? God tells Abraham, I will not destroy it for the sake of those 45 righteous. Remember that God is speaking with Abraham, and that God is in a visible body in which he had been eating with Abraham and with his family, and they had also been with the archangels Gabriel and Michael, who then left to Sodom. And they were there in Sodom while Abraham was with God, with Elohim speaking and interceding for his nephew Lot. And Abraham, remember? See, Abraham was interceding for Lot, his family, which we also see in the third pool, how God's chosen ones will be claiming, asking for mercy for their relatives, which Sister Hattie Wright did on behalf of her children, and God gave them to her, and God will give us our relatives because we have claimed them, and God will give them to us, and we will have them in eternity. Now look, he goes on to say, and Abraham, well, he desired for Sodom and Gomorrah not to be destroyed, although they deserved the destruction, because Lot lived there with his family, and they had many properties. And Abraham didn't want Lot and his family to be ruined. And no man desires the ruins of his family, nor of his home, nor of his nephews, even if they are people who live in another house or another city or in another country. And if someone doesn't think like Abraham thought, they are worse than the unbelievers. You have no love for your family. Remember that love is corrective, and things are spoken out of love for the elect, and also for the sake which we extend to our relatives. Now see, it says, and if anyone doesn't think as Abraham thought, he is worse than the unbelievers. He has no love for his family, and if he has no love for his family, neither can he have love for God. Because if he can't love those whom he sees, how can he love whom he doesn't see? So express love towards your family members, protect your family members, and strive so that ruin will not come over your family members or over their homes, but rather remain united in divine love, and the homes remains united in the holy state of matrimony. Abraham remained interceding for Lot, although Lot didn't know. You see, Sister Hattie Wright's children didn't know that their mother was standing there in front of the prophet, and she was going to make the greatest request that any mother could ever make for the salvation of her children. Abraham remained interceding for Lot, although Lot didn't know. And God being with Abraham, he was listening to his friend Abraham, and he was revealing to Abraham what he was going to do. Remember that every time Elohim appears, there is judgment that will fall upon human race, but also blessing for the descendants of Abraham through Christ, the son of Abraham. Now see how whenever Elohim appears, there is judgment, or divine judgment is about to fall. And notice that whenever he rises from the throne of the Father and takes the title deed, there, that throne changes to a throne of judgment. In other words, at his coming, after taking the book, what comes is judgment. But also remember that blessings comes. And look what it says in page 277 of the Book of the Seals in Spanish. He says, finishing there, he says, now, just search your heart, my brother, my sister, my friend. I've been with you a long time. This is about 33 years. Have I ever told you anything in the name of the Lord, but what come to pass? Search Christ now, while you have a chance to. It may come pretty soon where you can't do it. And that time is this time. There is no longer time for people to seek Christ and receive salvation and obtain the theophanic body and be born again and receive the glorified body after hearing the rapturing faith. In other words, this time in which we are living is already that time that Brother Branham is saying there, that later on will be happening. He continues to say, he may leave the seat anytime of his intercession. Then you would cry with all your heart, and you could stomp, you could speak in tongues, you could run up and down the floor, you could do anything you want to, and join every church in the world. There's nothing, no more bleach for your sins. Then where are you then? Well, I believe with all my heart the seat is still open. I believe he is still in the throne of God. At that time, notice, and also up to the time where our brother William was telling us that the door of mercy was about to close, there around 2018. Notice, still at that time, he was sitting on the throne of God as intercessor. He says, but soon he's going to rise now and come forth to claim what he has redeemed. In other words, see, in order to claim, he has to come out of the throne of intercession first. And when he is doing the claiming work, then consequently, there is no more mercy. The throne of mercy is finished. And only the chosen ones will find mercy in the ministries of Moses and Elijah. He goes on to say, he's doing the work of kinsman redeemer while Ruth is waiting. But soon, you know, after Boaz done the kinsman work, then he comes and claims his possession. And that's exactly what the Bible said he's done. He come forth and took the book. Then the intercession is over. He is off the throne. There is no more blood on the mercy seat. And then, what it is? Judgment seat. Don't let it be said, some of these days I thought the rapture was supposed to come. And hear the voice say back, it is in the past. God help you. Notice
cómo todo eso
how all
que
that
nos habló el reverendo
the
William Branham
Reverend William Branham
en el libro de los sellos
spoke to us
que
in the book
comenzó
of
a
the
predicar
seals
esa serie de
since
los
he
sellos.
started preaching
Él
that
nos decía
series of the seals.
que
He
él
was telling us that
iba a tomar
he
el libro
was going to take the
y
book
que iba a cesar la intercesión
and
en
that
cielo.
he was going to cease
Y
intercession
el
in
hermano
heaven.
colocaba
And Brother
la palabra
William
futuro. Eso
would
está en el
place the
futuro,
word
futuro,
future,
futuro.
that is in the
Y todo era
future,
futuro, y
future,
el mismo
future.
hermano Branham decía,
And Brother
eso será más
Branham
adelante.
himself said
Vean
that would
cómo
be later
toda
on.
esa palabra
See how
que fue hablada por el
already
reverendo
all
William
that
Branham
word
cuando estuvo
was
predicando
spoken
los
by the
sellos.
Reverend William Branham when
Ya
he was preaching the
todo eso,
seals.
esa parte
Notice
de él
already all
levantándose
that
del trono de
that
intercesión
part of
y
him
tomar el libro,
rising from the
abrirlo en
throne
el
of
cielo
intercession
y
and taking
traerlo
the
en
book,
Apocalipsis capítulo 10 y
opening it
entregarle
in
un
heaven
nombre
and
para
bringing it
profetice
in
otra
Revelation
vez
chapter
sobre muchos
10
pueblos, naciones
and
y
handing
lenguas.
it
Ya
to
eso
a man
es
to
una
prophesy
realidad.
again
¿Qué
over
quiere de la
many
iglesia?
peoples,
Ya
nations,
no
and
está
tongues.
él en el
That is
trono de
already a
intercesión
reality in the midst
como
of the
sumo
church.
sacerdote
He
haciendo
is no
intercesión
longer
por su
in a throne
sangre
of intercession
por
as
los
high
seres
priest,
humanos.
making intercession with
Y
his blood for human
como
beings.
vimos anoche,
And as we
para
saw last night,
poder
in
ser
order to be
purificado
purified
ahora,
now,
ese grupo de las
that
falsas
group of the foolish,
tendrán que
they
reconocer
will
el
have to
mensaje,
recognize
o
the
sea,
message,
por
that
medio de
is,
aquel que lo
through the
está
one
hablando,
who is speaking
tendrá
it.
que reconocer
They
la
will have to
manifestación de Dios
recognize the
y
manifestation of God
así
and
dar
thus
su vida
give
por
their
Cristo,
life
por el
for
ungido en la
Christ,
gran
for
tribulación
the anointed
y
one in the
poder
great
ser
tribulation,
purificados
and be able to be purified,
para que después
so that
del
after
milenio
the
resuciten
millennium they will
y
be
obtengan
resurrected
así vida
and
eterna
thus
por
obtain
haber
eternal life
dado su
for
vida
having
por
given their
Cristo.
life for
Ahora vean
Christ.
cómo todo es un
Now,
programa,
see how
el cual
everything
Dios
is a
lo está
program
cumpliendo
which
al pie
God
de la
is
letra.
fulfilling very precisely.
Y a cada uno de los
And
escogidos,
to each one
los
of the
cuales
elect
han estado
who have
recibiendo la
been
misericordia
receiving
de Dios
God's
por última
mercy
vez,
for the last time,
pues
well,
estaremos
we will
en
be
la cena de las bodas del Cordero y
at
dirán,
the
el
marriage
rapto
supper of the Lamb,
ya
and we will
ha
say,
sido
the
una
rapture
realidad
has already
para mi
been
vida.
a reality in
Ya
my
no
life.
preguntar, oye,
It
pero
is no
no
longer
se supone que
asking,
habría un
hey,
rapto,
but it wasn't supposed to be a
porque los
rapture,
juicios están
because the
cayendo.
judgments are falling.
Ya pasó.
It's already happened.
Los escogidos de eso dirán, los que se queden.
That is what
Los escogidos
those
de
who
Dios dirán,
remain will say,
pero
and God's chosen ones will
vemos
say,
cómo el rapto ya
we
ocurrió,
see how the rapture
y
happened,
ahora estoy aquí,
and now I am here
recibiendo
receiving
los galardones
the
aquí en la cena de
rewards
las bodas del Cordero,
here at the marriage
en esta
supper
gran
of the
cena
Lamb,
que
at this
nos
great
fue
supper
prometida y que
that was
fuimos
promised to us
invitados,
and
y
that we
ahora
were
estamos aquí
invited to,
recibiéndolo.
and
O
now
sea,
we are here
ellos dirán,
receiving it. In other words,
si
they will
habló del
say,
rapto,
there was talk
y
of
yo
a
fui
rapture,
uno de los que
and I was
raptados.
one of
Aquí
those
estoy
who
en la
was
cena de las bodas
raptured.
del Cordero.
Here I am at the
Y
marriage
Dios aquí
supper
dice el
of the
hermano
Lamb.
Branham que
And
enjugará
God,
las lágrimas
Brother Branham
de
says
los ojos
there, will
de
wipe
los
away
escogidos.
every tear from
Ahora
the
recuerden,
eyes of the elect.
porque
Now
ya saben
remember,
todas las
because
luchas
now, of course,
que
all the
tuvimos
struggles
cuando
that
estábamos
we
en esos
had
tiempos terrenales, ya
when we were
habrán
in
cesado.
those earthly bodies
Recuerden que el
will have
rapto,
ceased.
¿qué
Remember
pasa
that
ahí?
at the rapture, there is a
Ahí
roll call.
se determina
There is
quién entra al
determined
milenio y
who
quién
enters the
no entra
millennium
al
and
milenio.
who doesn't enters the millennium.
Las fatuas
The foolish
no entrarán al milenio.
will not enter the millennium.
Los
The 144,000 will enter the millennium. And the elect, of course, the queen, will be in the millennium as well, which are the kings and priests who will be ruling for the millennium and all eternity. It is a very glorious and great time that has been given to us. And we can say, the lines have fallen in pleasant places, and great is the inheritance that is ours. May God bless you and God keep you. And thank you very much, Missionary Miguel Bermúdez Marín, for this opportunity that you give me to greet you all there in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, Mexico, in the congregation of Reverend José Raúl Hernández, and all the brethren there, and all who are listening to us through the satellite Amazonas or internet.